The morning light slipped quietly through the thin curtains, painting soft stripes across the wooden floor. The air still smelled faintly of rain. Ethan Cole stirred awake on his worn couch, the kind of half-sleep that follows a long night of exhaustion. The sound of clinking dishes came from the kitchen. For a brief moment, he thought Lily, his 7-year-old daughter, was up early again. But then a low hum, a woman's voice, floated through the air. He sat up slowly. Standing by the stove was a woman, her back to him. His shirt white, too large for her, hung loosely off one shoulder. Bare feet, messy hair, steam rising from the kettle beside her. She turned slightly, her eyes meeting his, calm, knowing. "You're awake," she said softly. "I remember now. You saved me last night." Ethan blinked, his mind scrambling to piece together fragments of memory, the storm, the crash, the headlights in the rain. And then it hit him. The woman standing in his kitchen wasn't just anyone. She was Charlotte Hale, CEO of Hale Industries, one of the most powerful women in New York. And she was wearing his shirt. The night before had been a hurricane in disguise. Rain lashed against the window panes, thunder crawling across the sky. Ethan had been closing the garage when he saw the flash of headlights veering off the main road, followed by the unmistakable crunch of metal against gravel. Without a thought, he grabbed his flashlight and ran. A silver sedan had skidded into the ditch, the front half buried in mud. He could barely see through the downpour, but when he pulled the door open, he found her unconscious, soaked, a small cut across her forehead. He didn't recognize her then, only saw a human being who needed help. He carried her through the rain, his arms trembling not from weight but from the cold biting through his jacket. When he reached home, Lily ran to the door, her eyes wide. "Daddy, is she okay?" "She will be," he'd said, setting the woman gently on the couch. He found a towel, cleaned her wound, and draped a blanket around her. Her clothes were drenched, so he left one of his old shirts nearby, in case she woke. He didn't ask who she was, or why she was out there alone in a storm. He only made sure she was warm. He spent the night on the couch, too tired to think, too restless to sleep. Morning brought silence, the kind that only happens after a long storm, when everything feels washed clean. Ethan rubbed his eyes, still unsure if the night before had been real, until the sound of her humming reached him again. Now, seeing her standing there in his kitchen, his shirt slipping from her shoulder, her hair tousled like a forgotten memory, he felt something twist quietly inside his chest. She noticed his hesitation and offered a small smile. "I hope you don't mind. My clothes were soaked." Ethan swallowed. "No, of course not. You should sit. I'll make you some coffee." "I already did," she said, holding up a steaming mug. "It's the least I can do after you pulled me out of a ditch." He wanted to laugh, but his voice caught in his throat. "You remember that?" She nodded, her eyes tracing the small details of his modest home. The chipped table, the faded family photo of Ethan and Lily at the beach, the little girl's school drawings taped to the fridge. "You live here alone?" "Just me and my daughter," he replied quietly. "Lily, she's still asleep." Charlotte smiled faintly. "You're a lucky man." He raised an eyebrow. "Most people wouldn't call being a single dad in a town of 1,000 lucky." Charlotte turned to the window, where the first sunlight shimmered through droplets on the glass. "Maybe not, but you have warmth. That's more than most of us have." When Lily finally padded into the kitchen, her hair messy and eyes still heavy with sleep, she froze at the sight of the stranger. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Who's that lady?" Before Ethan could answer, Charlotte crouched down, her voice soft. "Good morning, sweetheart. I'm Charlotte." Lily tilted her head. "Are you Daddy's friend?" Charlotte hesitated, glancing at Ethan. "I suppose I am, for today." The little girl's eyes wandered to Charlotte's shirt, Ethan's shirt. "You're wearing Daddy's clothes," she giggled, then clapped her hands. "That means you like him." Charlotte flushed, laughter breaking through her composure for the first time in years. Ethan groaned softly, running a hand over his face. Kids never missed a thing. Charlotte stayed for breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, and the kind of simple silence that felt strangely comforting. She watched Ethan move around the kitchen, his hands rough, deliberate, careful in every motion. She saw the way Lily leaned against his arm when he poured milk, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her. It wasn't perfection, it was life. After breakfast, Charlotte insisted on helping wash dishes. Ethan tried to protest, but gave up. She rolled up her sleeves and worked beside him, her polished demeanor fading into something real. "You're not from around here," he said at last. She smiled. "No, I'm from Manhattan. Big city." "Loud city," she corrected gently. "I came here for a meeting that never happened, and then the storm." Her voice trailed off. Ethan nodded. "You're lucky I was outside." Charlotte glanced at him. "I think it's me who was lucky." As the morning stretched on, the world outside slowly dried. Charlotte's car was still half buried in mud, so she had no choice but to stay until the tow truck could come the next day. Lily took it as the best news ever. She showed Charlotte her dolls, her drawings, even the small flower garden Ethan had built behind the house. Charlotte followed the little girl outside, her bare feet brushing the wet grass. For the first time in years, she let herself laugh, not the sharp, polite kind she used at board meetings, but the soft, genuine kind that made her chest ache in the best way. When she came back inside, Ethan was fixing a leak under the sink. She watched him quietly, the sound of water dripping echoing faintly. There was something grounding about him, no pretense, no facade, just a man doing what needed to be done. "Ethan," she said softly, "you didn't ask me who I am." He kept working, his voice steady. Didn't seem polite to. "You're not curious?" "I'm curious about a lot of things," he replied, tightening a valve. "But right now, I'm just glad you're okay." Her lips curved, a rare expression of vulnerability passing through her face. If only he knew how rare that was for anyone to say they were glad she was okay, without wanting something in return. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, they sat on the porch. The sky was clear again, filled with quiet stars. Charlotte looked up, hugging her knees. "You have a beautiful view," Ethan chuckled. "You should see it in the summer, fireflies all over. Lily thinks they're fairies." Charlotte smiled faintly, eyes lost in the darkness. "When I was her age, my father used to take me sailing. Then, one day he stopped. He said he was too busy. After that, we stopped talking." Ethan glanced at her. "Work can do that to people. You sound like you know." "I used to be an aerospace engineer," he said quietly. "Worked long hours, missed dinners, missed moments. Then I lost my wife. After that, I just wanted to be here for Lily." Charlotte didn't speak for a long time. The sound of crickets filled the silence between them. Finally, she whispered, "You chose love over ambition." Ethan looked up at the stars. "I chose what wouldn't leave me." Her breath caught. No one had ever said something that simple and that true. The storm left a hush behind it, the kind of hush that makes every small sound feel like a confession. Somewhere past the dunes, the ocean breathed in long, even strokes. Sunlight slid across the floorboards like spilled cream. The tow company called to say the access road was still washed out. It would be at least another day before anyone could get to Charlotte's car. Charlotte didn't mind. Not yet. In the morning, Ethan brewed coffee while Lily made a show of spreading jam on toast with the solemn gravity of a surgeon. Charlotte learned the rhythms of their kitchen, where the chipped blue bowls were kept, which cupboard door always stuck, how the kettle whistled a shade too high when it was ready. She moved carefully at first, as though every step might send the moments scattering like sparrows. But the house invited her in. The walls had absorbed laughter and soothed crying, had learned to keep secrets and echo only what mattered. Lily set a plate down in front of Charlotte, a clumsy constellation of toast halves and apple slices. "This is our best plate," she announced. Charlotte glanced at the hairline crack that ran down the center like a faint river. "It's beautiful," Charlotte said. "Thank you." Ethan watched the exchange over the rim of his mug, a quiet softness settling into the creases around his eyes. He had been startled by Charlotte in his kitchen. Now he was startled by how easily she fit there. They fell into an effortless orbit. While Ethan tightened a loose hinge on the back door, Charlotte and Lily drew in the sunlight that pooled on the table portraits with stick figure arms too long and smiles too big. Charlotte's hair a golden waterfall because Lily only had a yellow crayon left that wasn't broken. Charlotte's laugh warmed the room each time Lily added another wild detail. A crown for Ethan, because he's king of breakfast. A cape for Charlotte, because she saved us from boring toast. Stars for the little house, because it's magic if you love it. Later, Charlotte slipped out to the porch while Ethan tinkered with an old radio. The air smelled like wet pine. She watched the sky, the way the clouds broke open to scatter light across the water. When she closed her eyes, she heard the city, the endless traffic, the hum of elevators, the clipped instructions she'd been giving and receiving for years. Here, the silence held her differently. It wasn't empty. It had weight, it had patience. "Do you always work with your hands?" she asked when she returned inside. Ethan had the radio guts spilled across a towel, wires like tangled veins. "Not always." He didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. The blueprints rolled up in the corner, the meticulous pencil sketches tacked above his workbench, the small airplane models balanced on the bookshelf they told a story. He'd traded wind tunnels and composite materials for a kitchen drawer full of rubber bands and a calendar crowded with school pickups. The choice lived in the slope of his shoulders and the set of his jaw. "Can I help?" she asked. He looked up, surprised. "Sure, could use another pair of eyes." She didn't know the exact things he needed, but she knew how to pay attention. She handed him the screwdriver when his fingers reached for it. She steadied the panel while he tightened the screws. When the radio crackled back to life, the three of them stood still to listen. A dance song from decades ago, the singer's voice grainy and sweet, Lily's face lit. Charlotte swayed without meaning to, a private movement she'd forgotten she owned. I belong to you, the song murmured through static. You belong to me. Ethan clicked the dial, embarrassed by how much it moved him. Charlotte pretended not to notice. Some tendernesses are meant to be seen at the edges, not in the center of the light. They ate lunch on the back steps, grilled cheese and tomato soup, the steam rising in thin ribbons. Lily insisted Charlotte sit next to her so they could match bites. When Lily raced down the yard to chase the neighbor's cat, Charlotte leaned back on her hands and tilted her face to the sundae. I don't remember the last time I sat this long, she admitted. On a porch? Anywhere. He looked at her then, really looked. Without the careful armor of a tailored dress and a boardroom posture, she seemed younger and older all at once. The cut on her forehead had scabbed cleanly. Strands of hair fell across her cheek. If you want a nap, he said, Lily and I can keep ourselves entertained. She laughed softly. If I close my eyes now, I might not open them until next week. Could be worse. She turned to him. Could it? He didn't answer. Not because he didn't have one, because he had too many. There were hours he wished would stretch into years, and years he wished could be folded into a single, merciful minute. He had learned not to bargain with time. In the afternoon, Ethan drove them to the small grocer on Main Street. The road glittered with puddles that caught pieces of the sky. Charlotte sat in the passenger seat with Lily between them, the little girl buckled into a booster. Lily narrated each landmark as if Charlotte were a visiting queen. The bakery with the cinnamon rolls, as big as your face, the lighthouse that worked, even when the moon is shy, the bookstore where Mr. Senta. Hargrove always saved the dog-eared fairy tale collections because Lily liked the stories where poor people win. Do you like stories? Charlotte asked. Lily nodded. Daddy says stories are maps for feelings. Charlotte glanced at Ethan. He kept his eyes on the road. Inside the store, the fluorescent lights hummed. Locals nodded at Ethan, the way people nod when they've seen you shovel your driveway and rock your baby at 3 a.m. He had that kind of familiarity about him, earned and ordinary, and somehow sacred. Charlotte wasn't used to being recognized for anything but power. The cashier, a woman with a braid like a rope thrown over her shoulder, smiled at Charlotte as if she were any other traveler stranded by a storm. At the end of the aisle, Lily held up a jar of honey shaped like a bear. We need this one, she declared. We do? Ethan teased. For tea, Lily said. And for when your heart is sore. Charlotte watched Ethan put the honey in the basket without argument. She found herself swallowing a knot that had nothing to do with her throat. Back at the house, while Lily drew another family portrait this time, adding a dog they didn't own and a son in sunglasses, Charlotte offered to cook dinner. Ethan hesitated the way men do when past experiences have taught them to be grateful but cautious. What? She asked, catching the expression. You think I can't cook? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. She shed Ethan's shirt to her elbows and pinned her hair with a pencil. The kitchen brightened, amused. She moved with the confidence of someone who made decisions for a living, only to discover that onions didn't care about corporate hierarchy. The first slice was too thick, the second too thin. Butter misbehaved. Garlic threatened mutiny. It was chaos, a cheerful one, and Ethan stepped in just enough to keep the pan from burning while letting her own it. They bumped shoulders. They apologized in unison. They almost laughed, then did. When the pasta turned out edible, and shockingly good, Charlotte lifted her fork to her lips as though tasting a new version of herself. Lily declared it fancy, a designation she reserved for anything that wasn't in the shape of a dinosaur. After dinner, Lily disappeared and returned with a battered shoebox. She set it on the table with ceremony. These are my treasures, she announced. I'm going to share one with you because you're a guest. Oh? Charlotte glanced at Ethan, who lifted his eyebrows as if to say this is a big deal. The box held a small universe. Smooth stones with hidden glints, a sticker with the edges curled, a paper crane with a bent wing, a marble that looked like it captured a storm inside, a seashell that hummed of long stories. Lily sorted through, eyes narrowed, until she fished out a tiny silver button, tarnished and lovely. It came off Mommy's sweater, Lily said simply. Daddy kept it in his wallet for a long time, but he said I should choose where it belongs now. Charlotte held the button the way you hold a promise. Something inside her chest lifted and broke at once. Are you sure? She asked. Lily nodded. You're nice, and you like stories where poor people win. Charlotte's laugh caught on the way out. She pressed the button into her palm until she felt the cool circle imprint there. Thank you, she whispered. Ethan watched the exchange, the way a man watches a moonrise, awed by something he cannot change and blessed by the fact that it happens anyway. When bedtime came, Charlotte helped Lily pick out pajamas. It should have been intrusive, but Lily made it a right, handing Charlotte a pair of socks to join. They read on the couch, Charlotte and Ethan taking turns. Lily leaned sideways against Charlotte's shoulder like it had always been there, a small bird finding a familiar branch. Again, Lily pleaded when the story ended. One more page, Ethan negotiated. He broke first. By the time Lily fell asleep, her lashes casting thin shadows, the house had dimmed to that particular blue that makes every room look like memory. Ethan carried Lily to her bed and returned to find Charlotte standing at the sink, staring out at the yard stippled with moonlight. "I should go," she said, though she didn't move. "There's nowhere," he replied with a wry gentleness, "to go." They stood without words, listening to the house breathe. Then, because quiet can be its own kind of music, Ethan turned on the radio again. A different song this time, slower, the kind made for kitchens at night. "May I?" he asked, surprising himself. She lifted her hand before she had time to change her mind. His fingers were warm and work rough. He placed his other hand at her waist, light, careful. They swayed in small arcs between the table and the stove, letting the shadows do the dancing for them. "What do you miss?" he asked softly. She thought of boardrooms and contracts and acquisition calls at midnight. She thought of her mother's silence and her father's absences, of anniversaries celebrated by assistants, of the apartment where no one turned on the lights unless she did. "I miss not having to be the strongest person in the room," she said. He didn't tell her she never had to be strong here. That would have been a promise he couldn't keep. Instead, he held her with the respectful gravity of someone who understood that strength takes many shapes and that some kinds break quietly. "What do you miss?" she asked in return. He looked past her to the hall, where Lily's drawings formed a gallery of things that mattered. "Science that didn't feel like betrayal," he said. "Work that let me come home in time to hear the end of a bedtime story." She leaned her forehead briefly against his shoulder. There was nothing to fix in that moment. There was only acknowledgement. They might have stayed like that longer if not for the small sound from the bedroom. Lily turning in her sleep, a whimper. Ethan stepped back, instinct already moving him. When he returned, Charlotte was still by the sink, hands around a glass she hadn't filled with water. "I almost forgot," she said, half to herself. "I had a meeting yesterday, a big one." He waited. It would have decided the direction of the company for the next 3 years. She laughed once, small and strange. "I didn't make it. Storms cancel all kinds of plans," he said. "Do you think that's an omen?" she asked, teasing the idea like a string she might pull if he nodded. "I think sometimes life reroutes us for reasons we don't see yet. Do you believe that?" "I want to." "Ugh." She turned her head toward him, catching, just for a beat, the way the world could tilt and stay. Then she exhaled, the spell loosening. "I should call my office in the morning." "Of course." She looked down at the shirt she wore, his shirt, and pinched the fabric between her fingers. "May I keep it for tonight?" "Keep it," he said, "as long as you need." When she slept, she dreamed not of deadlines but of a pier that went on forever, sunlight pouring through the ripe morning. She walked to the end and found a little girl with a crown of dandelions. When she turned, the girl had Charlotte's eyes. The town came to life the next day, small engines coughing back to work, gulls complaining about the light. The road crews reported progress, but not perfection. Another day, at least. Charlotte moved through the house like a tide, leaving things neater than she found them, smoothing blankets, rinsing glasses, folding dish towels with unearned reverence. It felt like a chapel, this attention to the ordinary. Ethan organized a corner of the garage. It had once been more workshop than storage. Now it was equal parts both. He kept a ledger on a shelf, appointments for tire rotations, oil changes, small repairs neighbors could afford. On top of the ledger, Charlotte noticed a thin stack of notebooks, not hidden, not displayed. "May I?" she asked, already careful. He shrugged with a smile that was almost an apology. "They're dull." They weren't dull. They were elegant. Concepts for a wind harvesting turbine small enough to power a lighthouse's auxiliary system. A modular wing designed for emergency medical drones to land on rugged terrain. A magnetic latch with fewer failure points. She traced the lines with her gaze, the way a pianist silently plays a melody over ivory she hasn't touched in years. "You still design," she said. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Mostly for the satisfaction of drawing something that fits." "Oh, do you ever send these out?" "To who?" She didn't say me. Instead, she laughed low and shook her head. "Old habits. I see patterns. I want to move them around until they make sense for both the heart and the ledger. That's a good habit. It's made me a few enemies." She closed the notebook gently and set it back exactly where she found it. They spent the afternoon mending him a wobbly chair leg, her the button line of one of Lily's cardigans. Lily narrated a puppet show with paper cutouts, each character speaking with a voice that sounded suspiciously like something she'd heard from adults. There was a queen of sandwiches, a knight of bedtime, a sea monster of math homework who turned out to be misunderstood. Charlotte applauded like it was Broadway. Ethan whistled through his teeth and bowed. The phone finally rang with a Manhattan area code. Charlotte stepped onto the porch to take it. The voice on the other end was polished and urgent. Her chief of staff, an executive, another executive, a board member sliding into the conference bridge just as someone else was sliding out. They talked about shareholder confidence and the optics of delay, about the deal that had to be renegotiated because the weather had dared to exist. Charlotte listened. She answered. Her words arranged themselves into clean, precise shapes. She agreed to a revised timetable. She declined a press statement. She authorized an interim plan. When she hung up, the quiet didn't rush back all at once. It seeped around her, filling the spaces between her bones. She went inside, schooling her face into calm. Ethan was helping Lily cut out a cardboard crown. They looked up at her with the same question in different sizes. Everything okay? Ethan asked. Yes, she said, and then, because honesty blooms best when watered, and no. He waited. They need me. He nodded. Of course they do. She sat on the floor beside Lily and took the glue stick when it was offered. They affixed paper jewels to the crown, each one crooked and perfect. The crown would rip if you pulled too hard. It would also survive thunderstorms if you wore it with conviction. Charlotte understood both truths without needing to speak them. As afternoon drew cleanly toward evening, they took a walk to the beach. The sky was a shallow bowl of blue. Lily collected shells with the dedication of a curator. Charlotte and Ethan kept pace just behind her, letting the breeze press cool fingers against their cheeks. Were you afraid? Charlotte asked suddenly, eyes on the line where the water licked the sand. When the storm hit? Ethan considered. I'm always afraid, he said. That's how I know I still have something to lose. She let that sit inside her like a stone warmed by Sunday. I was afraid last night, she admitted, not of the road, of waking up and having to be me again. He looked at her then, at the way hair blew across her mouth, and she lifted a hand to catch it without vanity. You're allowed to be more than one version. Not in my world, she said, and softened it with a smile. They reached the jetty, where a boy in a red hoodie cast a line with the seriousness of a priest. The horizon lay smooth and far. Lily ran ahead, arms outstretched, then skidded to a stop. Daddy, she called. Look, skipping stones. Ethan obliged, choosing a flat one and sending it across the water. It hopped 4 times, then kissed the surface and sank. Lily squealed. Charlotte tried next. Her stone leapt once and surrendered, but Lily cheered anyway. When it was Charlotte's turn again, Ethan stepped close, his warm palm closing over her fingers to adjust the angle of her wrist. Like this, he said, almost a whisper. She nodded without moving. The salt air had its own gravity. When they released, the stone flew farther than she expected. She laughed, impulsive and free. It startled a flock of gulls into the air, white punctuation marks rising from the sentence of the sea. Walking back, Lily slipped her hand into Charlotte's without ceremony. It fit. That night, dinner turned simple again, soup reheated, soft bread, apples sliced with a rhythm that felt like gratitude. They ate with the kind of ease people earn. After, Lily disappeared and returned wearing the cardboard crown. I'm making a rule, she declared. We have to say one thing we're thankful for. Ethan tipped a salute. Yes, Your Majesty. I'll start, Lily said. I'm thankful for Daddy and for the lady who wears his shirt. Charlotte's smile didn't quite hold. I'm thankful, she said, voice steadier than her heart, for the storm and for where it let me land. Ethan took a breath and chose something small and true. I'm thankful for the jar of honey that's going to fix everything that can be fixed. Lily giggled. And for stories, she added generously. We have to be thankful for stories. When Lily finally slept exhausted by royalty duties and inspired by sugar, Charlotte and Ethan found themselves again on the porch. The moon laid a clean path on the water. The air tasted like the seam between seasons. She's extraordinary, Charlotte said, meaning Lily and also meaning the life Ethan had shaped around her. She is, Ethan agreed, meaning Charlotte too and not daring to say it. A quiet fell, the kind that asks and answers at once. Charlotte turned to him. There's something I didn't say earlier, she began. When I woke up, when I saw your shirt, I said I remembered you saved me. She looked down at the hem, where it hung on her, familiar now as if it had always been hers. That was true, but it wasn't all of it. He waited, the porch boards creaking as he shifted his weight. I remembered something I had almost forgotten was possible, being safe without having to earn it. He opened his mouth, then closed it. It was such a fragile admission he feared words might bruise it. I don't know what I can promise, he said finally, voice rough. Except that when you're here, you don't have to be anything else. A long minute passed. The sea kept time in its old way. She turned her face away, and he let her. It is its own kind of love to allow someone to compose themselves in the spaces where they need to. When I was little, she said, my mother collected buttons. She kept them in a tin shaped like a heart. Each one had a story, the one Lily gave me. Her voice thinned and then found itself. I haven't held a button that mattered since I was 10. Keep it, he said. I will. The phone vibrated in her pocket, a small, insistent insect. Manhattan again. She didn't answer. It stopped. A minute later, it started again. She turned it off. Tomorrow, she said. I'll be brave tomorrow. He believed her. He also knew bravery changes clothes depending on the weather. Before they said goodnight, she stepped forward and did something she had not done in years. She hugged someone without checking to see who was watching. He held her in a way that suggested he had been built to do so, steady and warm, without claiming more than was offered. Thank you, she murmured into his shirt that was hers now, for as long as now lasted. For what? For letting me be a person. He smiled, unseen. That's your best job. When she slept that night, she didn't dream of piers or conferences. She dreamed of a small table, 3 chairs, a plate with a hairline crack running down the center. In the dream, the crack wasn't a flaw. It was a river that mapped the way back. By morning, the road crews reported victory. The way in was open. The tow company could retrieve her car by noon. The world outside had decided to resume its appointed tasks. Inside, their small orbit tightened in anticipation of release. Lily took the news badly in the exact way children take news that rearranges their sky. She pouted with majesty, then cried with sincerity, then recovered with the pragmatism only the very young possess. If you go, she said, tugging at Charlotte's sleeve, can you write letters? Lots, Charlotte said. And will you visit? Charlotte glanced at Ethan. He didn't give her an answer to borrow. She had to make her own. I want to, she said. Lily nodded, satisfied for now. I'm going to draw you a map so you don't get lost. She spent the next hour doing exactly that, an elaborate scrawl of roads and arrows and hearts that labeled significant sites. The bakery, the lighthouse, the house with the porch, where the fairies live. At the top, in blocky letters, she wrote home with an arrow that pointed to a house shaped like a square with a triangle hat. Charlotte looked at it like it was a document with legal force. Maybe it was. She helped Ethan clear the breakfast plates one last time. He didn't trust his voice. He washed. She dried. The ritual made the air steadier. At the door, she hesitated. She reached for the hem of the shirt, then didn't. She looked at the button in her palm, then closed her fingers around it. I should change, she said. To return your... Don't, he interrupted gently. It looks better on you. A pause. The kinds of pauses that hold entire endings. Yesterday, she said, when we were on the beach, I kept thinking how strange it was that I knew where to place my feet. In the city, I always know where to place my words. Here, it was my feet. Maybe that's how you know a place is good, he said. It lets your body go first. Her breath trembled, then steadied. There will be a car here soon. I know. They looked at each other, and the ocean slid its quiet syllables through the window. Between them, the space filled with everything they would not say, not because it wasn't real, but because reality sometimes demands patience as proof. Lily thundered in, nearly tripping over her own map. I have to show you the special shelf, she said, grabbing Charlotte's hand. It's where we put wishes. Daddy says if you put them there, they don't get lost, even if you do. Charlotte allowed herself to be led. The shelf was a simple ledge near the back door. A rock with glitter, a folded note, a dried leaf the color of gold. Can I put something? Charlotte asked, her voice falling into the register people use in holy places. You have to, Lily said with official gravity. Charlotte took a breath. She placed the button there, this small round moon with another life. Does that mean you're coming back? Lily asked, unabashed. Charlotte looked at Ethan. He didn't rescue her. It means I don't want to forget the way, she said. Sirens of a tow truck floated in from the road like a chorus announcing change. Ethan exhaled. I'll walk you out. They stepped onto the porch. The truck idled at the curb. The driver waved. Charlotte curled her fingers around the railing once, as if memorizing the texture of weathered wood. She turned to him. Ethan, she said. His name in her mouth sounded like she could live there. If the world gets loud again. It will, he said. That's its job. She smiled. If it does, will you? He didn't make it easier. He didn't rescue. He waited. She started again. Will you keep the porch light on some nights? I already do, he said. The easiest thing would have been to kiss. It would have been cinematic and deserved. It would have been a promise they couldn't underwrite. Instead, Charlotte did the bravest thing she could in that exact moment. She reached out and took his hand in daylight and squeezed it once firm, storing. "Thank you," she said. "For the shirt, for the storm, for the quiet." He nodded. "For the button, for the map." Lily barreled out with one last hug that nearly knocked Charlotte off balance. "Don't forget," the girl instructed, handing her the map. "This arrow points to us." "Oh." "I won't," Charlotte said, and meant it so completely it scared her. She walked to the truck without looking back until she had to. She allowed herself one last glance at the porch, the door, the light, the man, and the little girl framed there. He lifted his hand. She lifted hers. It was not a goodbye. Not yet. It was an agreement to carry. When the truck pulled away, Ethan stood motionless, his hand still raised long after the vehicle disappeared around the bend. The house pressed around him. He could feel the absence she left the way. The ocean feels the moon by what it pulls and what it keeps. Inside, Lily tugged his sleeve. "Daddy? Mim? Is she coming back?" He knelt so they were eye to eye. He thought of patterns and rerouting and maps that weren't made of paper. He thought of a shelf where wishes went to be catalogued but not contained. "She knows the way," he said, and kissed Lily's forehead. That's a start. When Charlotte returned to New York, the noise swallowed her again. Glass towers, sharp heels, endless meetings, the rhythm she once ruled now felt foreign. She wore her armor of elegance, but at night, when the city quieted, she would find herself staring at the shirt she never returned. Ethan's shirt. The faint scent of rain and soap clung to it, whispering of mornings when laughter was small but real. Her company thrived. The world called her brilliant again. Yet, behind the applause, she felt the hollow echo of a home she'd never built. She tried to bury the memory of Lily's laughter, of Ethan's calm voice saying, "You don't have to be anything else here." But memories, she learned, don't fade, they hum quietly, waiting to be heard. One evening, a letter arrived at her office, a child's drawing of 3 figures under a yellow sundae. "The arrow still points to you," it read. Charlotte's hands trembled. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, tears came easily. Weeks later, she found herself driving north, past the coast, toward a name her heart still remembered, Haven Creek Road. The sea wind met her again, gentler this time. When she saw the house, the porch light was on. Through the window, she saw them, Ethan fixing Lily's hair, both laughing, the radio humming softly. She stood outside, her heart full and breaking all at once. She wanted to knock, to speak, to stay, but she didn't. Some loves, she realized, are meant to remain pure by distance. Charlotte reached into her coat pocket, took out the silver button Lily once gave her, and placed it gently on the porch railing beside a small jar of honey. Then she slipped a note beneath it, "For the storm that saved me." As she walked away, the porch light flickered steady, golden, and warm, just like the memory she carried home. And in that quiet space between the ocean and the wind, Charlotte finally smiled. She had built empires of glass, but only one place had ever truly felt like home, a small house where love had once borrowed her heart and left the light on.